up for Michele Carlo.
Whenever I tell someone that I grew up in the Bronx in the 1970s, people always want to know, oh my God, was it scary? And yeah, it was, sometimes, but not exactly in the way that you might think. See, I grew up across the street from one of the oldest buildings in New York City, St. Peter's Church. It was built in the early 1600s, so it really is one of the actual oldest buildings in all of New York City. And it takes up an entire block, and it has this huge graveyard, which was like the playground for kids for blocks around. Probably because it was the only space that had actual trees for blocks around. So I spent a large part of my childhood there, running around, trying to catch praying mantises, doing rubbings from like the old graves that we said they were witches. And like if we saw that there was like a fresh grave, we would always like run around and look for it because my cousin Benny found a $50 bill near one once. For real. And, yeah, $50, man. In those days when payphones were a dime, that was like mad money. But but you might think, well, boy, that's kind of like creepy and gruesome. Like you would actually go and play in the graveyard. But I didn't really think it was strange because when you grew up Latin, like I did, like various forms of worship and sundry, they color your everyday life. Like for example, one of my aunts, my tita Ophelia, she had a glass of water that she would put behind her front door, so in case that you brought anything in evil with you, it would fall into the water and drown. And the glass was always empty, and she was always filling it up. And it was really because her dog was always drinking the water. But I never told her because she was a bitch. And then there was my other aunt, my Titi Carmen. She was what you call a curandera. She was into herbs and like healing with herbs. So she had a tea and a plant for everything. If you couldn't sleep, she'd give you linden. If you had cramps, she'd give you rosemary. If you had something, anything that you wanted to have a girl, she'd give you this plant. You want to have a boy, she'd give you this plant. I mean, she had teas. If you want to get it up, she'd give you another plant. You want to get it down, she'd give you another plant. She had so many plants. She had tea for everything. And then there was my mom, and she's still with us, thank God. She's pretty religious, and sometimes she would like pray in front of the window, and she had this rosary that had like these glass beads, and if the sun was right, it would catch the clear glass, and it would look like the prism from Pink Floyd, and it just like looked like she was counting rainbows in her hand. It was really pretty, but no tea leaves. And no water with dogs drinking it, and no Hail Marys could have prepared any of us for the great Voodoo War of 1976. My family had been the first Puerto Rican family to ever live in our apartment building. We moved in the mid-60s, and 10 years later, we had to endure the McCrearys and the Brady's and the O'Donnells and the Colettis and the DeLucas telling us that our food stank, and that me and my brother ran around wild in the hall. Like Italians, garlic don't stink, like Irish are peaceful. And like, my brother and I had to stay in a house all the time. Yeah, we listen to Santana, but every Puerto Rican listened to Santana in those days. So whatever. So like when two other Puerto Rican families moved into the building, we thought that we'd have allies. Totally. We were like, yeah, But the adults didn't speak much English, and the teenagers didn't listen to either the Clash or Led Zeppelin, so they were therefore useless. And my mother tried to befriend them, but they were kind of like standoffish and cold. And what she did find out was that they came from the same town in Puerto Rico, and their families had hated each other for generations. To which, when my father found out, he was like, well, that's fucking stupid. If they hated each other over there, what the hell did they move in here for? And we soon found out. The newest incarnation of the generations-long war. This is like the Puerto Rican Hatfields and McCoys. Okay, every time they passed, okay, so I have to tell you that we lived in apartment 5C. The Garcias lived in 5D, and the Moraleses lived in 5B. So we're in between these two families, like Puerto Rico on the 5th floor. So, and every time these families would pass each other, I'm talking about the grown-ups, not the kids. Anytime the grown-ups would pass each other, they'd be cursing at each other. And not like, you know, fuck you, son of a bitch, you know, whatever. Not like regular American curses, no. These were incantations. These were proclamations for insanity, diarrhea, unemployment, barren wombs, cancer, and more diarrhea. And all this stuff, constantly, like all the time. And like I would come home from school and they'd be like yelling at each other. And these are not words that my family use. So like I, you know, go in the house, whatever, like, Ma, they're yelling, and you're like, don't listen to them. And then, but one day I came home from school, and this was a long time ago, I have to remember it. And so in front of the Garcia's door, I find 3 pennies sprinkled with like what looks like talcum powder or cornmeal, and like, you know, I'm like thrifting, like 3 pennies. I have 100 more, I buy a pack of cigarettes. But my mother had the door open a crack, and she sees me. She goes, "What did you get? What did you get?" And I open my hand, and then she goes over and she sees that there was like this little mound of like flour or cornmeal or something, and she takes the pennies out of my hand. She throws them out the kitchen window 5 flights straight down. She drags me into the bathroom. She washes my hands with like this lava soap that was all like volcano dust in it, like scratched up my hands, and she poured alcohol on them, and she told me to never, ever, never, ever, never, ever, never look at or touch anything in front of any apartment ever again. Fine. Except that every other day now there was something else not to look at. There were strange colored candles arranged in patterns, and there were flowers with the heads cut off, and fish heads, and chicken feet, and other strange things. And then the fighting, it escalated. It just got worse. I remember lying on the living room floor on my stomach. My brother and I were trying to do our homework, and like they're just like screaming about diarrhea and insanity and barren wombs and brain cancer and more diarrhea and unemployment and all this stuff. And like my father was just turning the TV on louder, and you know, it was starting to be really weird. Like every night there'd be these huge fights. And they started like yelling out the windows to each other, okay? So it's like, you got it from both ways. They'd be fighting in the hallway, and then they'd be yelling out their bedroom windows at each other. So it's like you were surround sound of diarrhea and insanity and barren wombs and brain cancer. And then I had other things to worry about. Because one day, soon after this, I went to St. Peter's Cemetery, which I hadn't gone to in a long time because I was a little bit beyond the praying mantis stage. I was almost 16. But I went there to be alone because I had just found out that yet another boy that I had a mad crush on had told everyone that I had a nice ass, but an ugly face. Aww. Red on the head, like the dick on a dog. That's what they told me. And I went there to cry. As 15-and-a-half-year-old girls will want to do when they get teased and they get told they're ugly. I put my hand down, and I jerked up immediately because it was wet. And it was wet with what looked like blood. And when I looked down, I saw a piece of mail that was addressed to the Garcia family, tied with red string, and what looked like a freshly cut chicken foot. So I grabbed this piece of mail, and I run home, and I show it to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, look what I found in the cemetery. It's for Garcia's man. And she snatches it out of my hand. I think she's going to pour alcohol and fire in it, but no. She runs to the Morales' door, and she knocks on it, and she goes, hello? There's no answer. She goes, Mira, I know you're in there. What you're doing is not correct. It's not sanitary. Children play in that graveyard. Welcome to the Bronx. And then this voice comes from behind the Morales' door in Spanish, telling my mother to shut up or she's going to be next. And she goes in and she bangs the door. The next day, I come home from school, and there's a skinned, crucified mouse slaying onto the Garcia's door. They moved out that night, cursing and screaming from 10 o'clock at night till 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about insanity and diarrhea and bad wounds and brain cancer and unemployment up, we're all bleary-eyed, and my mother's just pacing. She hadn't slept. She's just like pacing the apartment. She's like, this isn't right. This isn't right. Someone's got to do something. And my little brother was like, Ma, what are you going to do? Get Titi Carmen's plant after them? And then like I could just see the light bulb go over her head. No. Worse. So she goes into the bedroom, parents' bedroom, and she shuts the door. And what she does is she picked up her Bible. She started reading the Bible out the window, nonstop. Now, did I say she was reading the Bible out the window nonstop? When we left for school that morning, she was reading out the Bible out the window. When we came back from school that afternoon, she was reading the Bible out the window. When my father came home from work and nearly burned down the kitchen trying to cook his dinner, she was still reading the Bible out the window. This is when my father decided he needed to work a double shift. So he just left and abandoned my little brother and me on the front lines. My mother is now reading two Bibles out the window. One in English and one in Espanol. And my brother and I, we try to counteract this Armageddon over here. So like we have both TVs on, we're blasting the Honeymooners on one, and Rat Patrol on the other, and then I start playing Black Sabbath albums, and he starts playing Jesus Christ Superstar, I really like to listen to, and all this stuff, my mother's just yelling louder and louder and louder and louder, and we just fall asleep, because we're just totally exhausted. Next morning I wake up, my mom's as fresh as a daisy. And she says, she hands me the garbage, and she's like, oh, can you throw this out, please? And when I leave the apartment, I see that the Morales' door is just wide open. And I peek inside, and they're gone. They freaking booked. Like, what time of night did they leave? Because we were awake blasting Rat Patrol, and the money was like 1 o'clock in the morning. When did they leave? And I'm like thinking about this, and I'm going down 5 flights of stairs, and I go in the alley to pick up the garbage, and I see all these like clothes and like possessions, like kitchen, like garbage, just like total, like, it's like someone took the contents of their apartment and just like flung it all over this alleyway and on the garbage cans. And among all this stuff, I see these crumpled up pieces of paper. And I pick one of them up and I open it, and it's a page from the Bible. I pick another one up, it's a page from Santo Biblia en Español. And I look up and I see my parents' bedroom window in between the Garcias and the Moraleses, the curtains, the window's open and the curtain is, and I see my mom is watching me. And I look up and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, okay, so the Great Voodoo War of 1976 was stopped by the one weapon that no curse has any power against, and that is the fury of a Latina mother scorned. Woo! And afterwards, I said, Ma, what were you doing? I mean, that's kind of like crazy. And she says, yeah, she thought she should repent because like she ruined 2 Bibles. But you know, come to think of it, the more I thought about it, the more I kind of like really admired her. And I thought that, damn, that was like kind of punk, right? I mean, when you think about it, she had Sinead O'Connor beat by like a whole 15 years. Happy